This special investigations webinar with L&Q, hosted by the Housing Ombudsman Service Centre for Learning. I'm Anthea Chilton. I'm one of the Sector Learning and Development Leads here at the Housing Ombudsman Service. And today we're really pleased to be joined by Matt Foreman, who is the Executive Director of L&Q, Fayann Simpson, who is the Chair of L&Q's Resident Services Board, and also Raj Kumar, the L&Q Complaints Champion. And Matt, Fayann and Raj are here to talk about their experience of the special investigation process. So you'll hear about the learning from not only from a landlord's perspective, but also from a customer and board perspective too. So thank you very much, Matt, Fayann and Raj, for joining us this morning. Really looking forward to the session. We've been planning it for a while, so it's really exciting that it's come round. But before I hand over to Matt, I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of what a special report is, as we publish lots of reports here at the Ombudsman, so you may not be sure what a special investigation report is and what that means. So you may have heard of a special report before, or perhaps a P49, and you might wonder whether these things mean the same thing. But yes, they do. A special report is issued under paragraph 49 of the Housing Ombudsman Scheme. So that's where its sort of short name comes from. The special report is triggered by an analysis that our insight and development team do around a range of factors. So that could be an analysis of emerging themes from our casework, and that's both in dispute support and dispute resolution and triage as well. It could be down to things that have come out of the regulator, changes in regulator ratings. So there are a whole range of different factors that go into why the Housing Ombudsman might issue a special report. So what we do is we look at what our casework's telling us. We review all of those findings of determinations on the Ombudsman's casebook, and we look at the evidence that we request from the landlord as well, to form a really sort of well-rounded view of what's going on with the landlord in the special investigation. And throughout the special investigation process, we have regular engagement with the landlord. We talk to them about the emerging themes, listen to them about the steps that they've already taken, and then we form a view of where we think the landlord is right now, as well as what our case work is showing us. So the words in the scheme, or the Ombudsman Scheme, around the special report is that it's a further investigation beyond the initial complaint to establish whether any presenting evidence is indicative of a systemic failing. So that's essentially what we're looking for, whether the themes are showing us that actually something is wider reaching than just an isolated issue. And then we can refer to the regulator of social housing if we feel that it is the case. So with all of that in mind, sort of a bit of a background to what the report is, why did we decide to carry out a special investigation report into L&Q? It was all around the risk assessments that our triage did, and they identified a number of high-risk cases involving L&Q. And some of the themes that came out of that analysis were complaint handling, disrepair, vulnerable residents, and alongside that we did look at our complaint handling failure orders as well, or you might have heard them be called CHFOs. So that's sort of why we thought that, you know, this really needed a further look from these sort of emerging themes and high-risk cases, and that's why we decided to carry out a special investigation into L&Q. So during the writing of the report, the engagement with L&Q was positive, and there was a willingness to change. And this is what today's session is all about. So it's about sharing that learning from the special investigation process, hearing from Matt, Fayann and Raj about the changes L&Q have made along their learning journey, the improvements that are in place and what's still to come. So that's probably enough from me for now, and I will hand over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for setting up the webinar. I think it's a good opportunity to share kind of the experience and the process around P49, but also for us to reflect back on what's changed, what have we done, and reflecting back, is there any bit of that we would do differently as well. So thank you for the opportunity to have the session. I'm just going to talk you, so I'm Matt Foreman, the Exec Director for Customer Services at L&Q. And I just want to talk you through a bit about the process we went through. What was that like? What was the process about? Talk to you about the midway point and the engagement that we had throughout the process with the Ombudsman team. The final report, which I think was fair to say it was challenging. It wasn't a pleasant read for us, and it was difficult. But then what have we done with it? And how have we then gone on to develop a healthy and robust relationship with the Ombudsman Service, but importantly, improving the service for customers and using it as a real catalyst for change. So in terms of the process for us, we were informed of the P49 investigation around November to December of 2022. And from recollection, that one of the key triggers for that was that we had, I think, 32 damp and mould cases, which in terms of risk at that particular point in time was high risk and high number. So understandably, there was a focus on what's going on there. And as a result of that, we then were informed that there will be a paragraph 49, there will be regular monthly meetings set up to look at what the scope of that would include, and there will be engagement throughout that whole process. So we engaged with that with the Ombudsman Service. Now, what I would say is the scope started initially on the trigger being damp and mould, but I think, as you can probably have seen from the report and from the summary there from Anthea, it broadened because more of those themes emerged as they went through the investigation. And one of the challenges for this was that some of the cases were historic backdated cases. So some cases going back as far as 2019, but going up mainly up towards the end of 2021. So they were backward looking, but gave the insight from the Ombudsman Service about some of the challenges. And one of the challenges for us is L&Q changed our strategic direction significantly in 2021. We'd gone from a strategy of particularly trying to focus on growth and trying to provide as many affordable homes as possible, given some of the housing pressures in and around the south, to a one which focused on three key areas: health and safety, service improvement and a reliable, repeatable service, and investment in our stock. But it's fair to say from 2021, that's quite a strategic shift and you don't see those instantly happening. So we recognise some of the issues within that report, but it was part of the context that triggered that strategy change and shift. So the investigation got underway. We met the Ombudsman team regularly, and I think we had a good engagement with the team. I think they were really clear on what they were doing, happy to talk to us, open and honest through the background discussions that we had with the team throughout the process, and robust and challenging, which I would expect. And I would hope they would say the same of us. We were equally at the table engaging with that. And 4 months in, I remember a point around 4 months in, which was around about March, in the review of 2023, we reached about the halfway point, and already from 35 cases, the themes were emerging. And I remember the meeting where we'd gone back to say, actually, we think the themes are vulnerability, repairs, complaint handling, record keeping, ESB. And we both agreed they were the issues to focus on, which was helpful because then that gave us a real focus about what do we do going forward. And as Anthea said, on top of the monthly engagement meetings, we would also have a midway point opportunity to present. So what had we done? What were the issues? Where were we now? And what were the challenges that we thought were in place from that and the actions we were proposing to take, which was a really helpful point to try and share with the Ombudsman Service our journey and where we're up to and what the challenges were and where we'd already made some improvements. So we had ongoing engagement continuing from there. I would have to say through that process, it was quite a difficult, pressured process in terms of us providing lots of information quickly. So the report looked particularly, I think the final number was 102 or 103 cases. And the Ombudsman would rightly send us that and say, right, we need the pack of the information for this. For our team, that was a particular focus in terms of resource and a particularly stressful point for the team, which if I could go back again, would probably do differently in terms of how we resourced that. Because it was a challenge to do that on top of the service that we were continuing to run. So we got the final report around about June, with an opportunity to comment, an opportunity to share that with our board and other key stakeholders to make sure that they were aware and fully aware of what was going on. and come back with any comments or clarifications, which we did. We got the draft report. There were lots in that report which was familiar, which we agreed we had got wrong. Some bits of it we didn't always agree with. So I would say we had a fair but robust relationship in trying to go back and sometimes challenge or clarify some of those issues that we didn't always agree with. But fundamentally from that report, we'd let 102 customers down. And fundamentally for us, that was the key point. We had let those customers down. We wouldn't defend that because we'd got it wrong. And we had to take the learning from that being the key thing to focus on about how do we take that forward? How do we use that as a catalyst for change? And at the same time, when we got that final report, we also self-referred the regulator. We'd kept them updated that we expected a difficult report to be coming. And in fairness to the Ombudsman Service, they told us it would be a difficult report before we received the final version as well. And they weren't wrong. So that was a part of that open dialogue that we had with them. In terms of the regulator then looked at the report and came back to us, agreed we'd got those cases wrong, but asked us and looked more at systematic failure and looked in terms of the proportion and number of interactions and transactions and service delivery with customers. I think the regulator's view was we'd got those cases wrong, and we know there will be more cases that we will have got wrong, but they didn't feel it was systematic in terms of the proportion of failures that we'd had. But to each customer, that's no consolation at all, and we know that, and we've got to get that service right for those customers. So overall, the report covered 102 individual cases. We know we'd had a good dialogue around the timing because we felt that we'd moved on and improved some of the services, but we developed and put in place and agreed a robust action plan from that. Now I know Fayann and Raj are going to talk about the Resident Service Board, the board role in that, so I'm not going to cover those bits because that then fed into how do we make sure we're held to account by residents and the board, as well as engaging with the Ombudsman on progress made. We had to do a lot of preparation behind the scenes in advance of that report being presented. So in terms of stakeholders, we had to really think about our team. What were the messages that we had to give to our team so they were aware of the report? For us, the lenders. So what would this do to our credit ratings? What would the questions be from them? How do we really manage that carefully and clearly? Customers, what was the messaging to customers to make sure that is open, transparent, and a chance to hold us to account for that? And as part of that, our executive team and directors phoned every one of those customers to listen to what their experiences were. And I have to say the insight we got from that is still alive in our exec team meetings now about remember when we heard about, and that helps us to inform some of the key decisions we make going forward still. So there was some really good insightful learning from that. We had to make sure our key local authority stakeholders were aware and informed of some of the issues, the challenges, the actions, the board and the Resident Service Board, which I know Fayann and Raj will talk about. And we then went on to deliver a whole range of improvements within that action plan. We come up with a completely different structure about how we deliver the service. We've invested £600,000 worth more of resources in terms of the team to do that. And even recently, we've put further resources in terms of pressure points through our whole complaints process. And that has led to much quicker responses, much better responses, and a better customer focus. So some positive outcomes from the report with the resources we put in there. We had to completely retrain the whole team in not just the whole process, but also around vulnerability, record keeping and other elements of it and the importance of it. And we changed our approach around damp and mould and brought in a building pathologist to train our team on what to look for, how to deal with that and how to handle that. So overall, it was insightful and helpful as an outcome. At times it was painful. I would be disingenuous if I said we always agreed on everything. We didn't. But the team that we engaged with throughout the whole process from the Ombudsman, I thought were really helpful in helping us to understand what the challenges were. Their ongoing engagement was needed, and it did get difficult at times, I think it would be fair to say, but we stuck with it. because we knew there were parts of this service we had to put right for customers and listen to what that systematic improvement is that we had to put in place. And I would now say from that, we've delivered that action plan that has now been signed off by the Ombudsman Service, but we're not satisfied there. We think there is more embedding of those changes to do. There is still further improvements that we know we need to make, and we've got things in place to make sure we systematically continue that journey. We still report through the government areas, and we're really focused on it. So that's probably enough from me. I'd probably like to pass across to Raj now, if that's all right, and he can talk to you about it from his perspective.
Cheers, Matt. I'm Raj Kumar. I'm a board member. I sit on the RSB, and also I'm a member responsible for complaints. Just to give you a little bit of background, I joined the board in 2021. I've worked in social housing for the last 35 years, and for the last 15 years, consultant. And a lot of that work is working with residents, and also increasingly over the last 2 years, reviewing complaints for other organisations. So I'll give you some insights related to that as well. There's three things I'm going to cover this morning. What the board doing before the paragraph 49 investigation and report. Talk about the impact of the P49 report, and then talk about the role member responsible complaints, or the complaints champion. So I'll cover those three things. So you look at this report, and it's hard hitting, and you think, what were the board doing during this time leading up to this? You know, we let down our residents. And I want to take us back to 2021, the summer I joined. We were in the middle of lockdown. And it was the year that Daniel Hewitt, a political correspondent for ITN, all those stories about damp and mold and terrible condition of social housing was in the media. And at the same time, in 2021, we commissioned an independent report into our housing management case handling. We'd let down a resident really badly, so we commissioned an independent report, and it highlighted a lot of the issues that were raised in paragraph 49. The board and its committees and exec team, we didn't sit on our laurels. We put a process in place, including the future shape strategy, the corporate strategy. Matt's touched upon that, and that really set the tone for our investment and our approach to what we were going to do about improving services. That really leads its way to complaints. The other significant thing that happened in 2021, it was the Black Lives Matter movement, and our chair made a really interesting, wrote a little about it, and setting the tone about changing the culture of the organisation, but thinking about societal changes and inequality, and it brings it home to us about thinking about our resident base. You know, it's very diverse, from London and the southeast to the Midlands, to the north, further north, and think about how we should be as an organisation. And there's absolute agreement on the board from 2021 onwards that, you know, we need to refocus our resources and energies to improving service delivery. So fast forward to 2023, when the report is given to us. You know, we've known about it since January of that year, that the investigation was starting. We saw Richard Blakewell in March of that year, and then around June, July, and then September, we had the formal report. It comes to us, and it hits you in the face, because you read about so many different cases, and we let down each one of those residents. And some of these themes we knew already, and there was an improvement process. But the impact of the paragraph 49 report really was to speed up the process of change. You know, it was really a wake-up call. Yes, we've got a plan to improve things, but things weren't changing fast enough. And it really refocused the board and our energies on making sure the resources went in the right place. The experience is that when you have this kind of crisis, and it is a crisis, when you receive a report like that, you know, the regulator's interested, our stakeholders are interested, and our residents are interested in it. It's easy to start doing the blame game. And a positive, I would say, at L&Q, the board, the exec team, RSB, and Fayann will talk more about that. You know, we're aligned in all accepting, holding our hands up. We all take responsibility for what happened. You know, it's not blaming a particular team or a person or a service. We have ultimate responsibility, and there was no blame game. So we could get on with what needed to be fixed. We had to seek legal guidance, you know, because there are implications coming from this. And we took legal guidance away from the exec team, just for the board to think about what our response should be. How should we respond to this? What are the consequences coming out of this? The plus side is resources for complaints doubled from about 30 to around 60. The big change is really the financial investment in improving our stock. You know, it's roughly about now 350 million per annum. That's a lot of money, 3 billion over 15 years. That's in place. It's been agreed, it's signed off. It is having an impact. The role of the last bit I want to talk, member responsible complaints, really. I originally said no to that role. This is going back when the report was produced, and I said to Matt, I don't really want to do this. 2 reasons: because it's time consuming, and also it makes you operational. As a board member, you're supposed to be strategic, but being the member responsible for complaints, you really have to take a deep dive. If you're to give assurance to the board that the self-assessment against the complaints code is robust, you really have to dig deeper as a board member. And that meant sort of getting some reality checks, not just from Matt and the asset management director, but also from the finance director and those teams. You know, we all ultimately have a link to complaints and improving service delivery. It meant talking to the staff producing the information for us, the people managing, the teams managing the complaints, but also using RSB, the Resident Services Board, as a sounding board to see what those residents are telling us about our approach to improving service delivery and handling complaints. Critically, as a board member, we do a lot of neighbourhood visits. We go to lots of events. I take that opportunity to really talk to our residents, but also our front-end staff. Our front-end staff know what's wrong with the service, what needs to improve, as much as the residents, and it's tying those two bits together. Where this whole process took me as a board member is to really look at complaints in a different way and really to think about the impact of our major works contract. You know, we've got 10 main contractors, there's quarterly meetings, and I go to those meetings because that has a direct link to a majority of our service failures around repairs or lack of stock investment. And also those contractors are on site for a number of years in some of our areas, and they are our eyes and ears, and they link into our own teams, and we need to work closer with them. Now, with that investment is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to get things right. Behind all this is about culture, thinking about the culture of the organization. And I feel strongly about that. That's part of the reason I joined this board. You know, you can have an impact. And the Housing Ombudsman produces a lot of spotlight reports, and I really appreciate that. There's a lot of learning in those reports. And I saw the recent one about stigma and thinking about how staff view residents and our staff's own experiences, and to think about how we can support front-end staff to make sure they do deliver what our expectations are. Critically, it's about trust. We trust the exec team. We want honesty from the exec team, we want honesty from our staff to talk to us directly when things go wrong. You know, we're there to be supportive and to challenge. I just want to finish off by saying, critically, one of the key things to getting complaints right and improving service delivery is providing more social housing. Some of the cases around damp and mold, you know, people are living in overcrowded conditions. You know, if you've got kids, there's no balcony or no communal space, you know, people are going to struggle in those environments, and we have to get that investment right as well. So it's a balancing act for the board. We've got a big chunk of money now going towards investing in that stock. We've had to reduce our investment in building new homes, so that's a constant challenge for the board. On that note, I'm going to pass you over to Fayann.
Okay, thank you so much, Raj. So thank you to the Housing Ombudsman for organising this meeting. I think it's a really important opportunity for us to share our experience with others and as a sector that we can learn from each other. So as you said earlier, I'm Fayann Simpson. I'm a board member and senior independent director at L&Q, and I chair our resident services board. And I've also been a resident myself with L&Q for over 25 years now. So I've been involved for 20 years in many ways in improving services. So chairing panels, complaints panels. I chaired L&Q's complaint panel for a period of time. So I've always been involved in improving services for residents across our organisation and across the sector. And I think, you know, as a board member now, my motivation remains the same. So I think, you know, so I'm going to talk about, you know, the report itself, how it felt, that aftermath, and also thinking about what RSB does, its role in alignment with the board, and thinking about that wider perspective of residents, because we've got to communicate with residents as we're going through about what we're doing, what we've learned, and residents also need to be able to see and have confidence in those changes. So I think that's what I'll say. So I think, you know, as Raj and Matt said, you know, receiving a report like that, it is it's sobering, and it's you know, a hard read, and you know, as a fellow resident, it really hits you right here, and that, you know, and I think you have to because I think you know, you have to resist that you know, that need to really react quickly, and you know, so I think it's a really important time to really reflect and think about that response. So I think you know, I think you know, there was that theme of ownership. So you know, in this case, you know, we have to own that fact that, you know, those residents were really impacted, you know, impacted the way they felt about their homes, how people lived in their homes. And so we really need to take that seriously. And as an organisation, as a board, as RSB, we certainly do. So I think it was having that supportive relationship, but being robust about the questions that we're asking. So the Resident Services Board is a board committee that sits alongside our other board committees, and we're really focused on giving assurance on customer services and ensuring we've got that side to the board, that we're giving an assurance that things that need to happen are happening. So I think RSB were involved, you know, before we gave a response. So thinking about that initial response, so RSB, we were wanting to ensure that there was that real focus on residents in any response. So having that sense of humility was really key, and having that sense of ownership. We also talked about building trust with residents, because residents really need to see, as well as us as an organisation telling residents about change, they need to see it. So it's really thinking about, are we communicating clearly as we make those changes? Are they really having the impact they need to? So I think RSB, you know, we have an important point of holding L&Q to account on the progress, and it's a constant part of our meetings. So it's a constant and central part of our meetings. And I think for me, it's really made me think about, you know, how do we know the things we know? So as an organisation, we are awash with information and data, but are we getting the information that really tells us what we need to know, and really helps us to focus on the things that we need to change? So I think as we've progressed, we've really thought about the performance information that we're getting in terms of the level of clarity. So thinking of alignment with the tenant satisfaction measures, which I think is an important improvement. It really focuses on the experience of the resident. So I think it's really, I think, helped us to hone in on that. And it's also made me think about embedding of processes. So I think we've been cautious in terms of, you know, really assuring ourselves that things are embedded and things that have changed. So I think that's been a really important step, because I think as well as making changes, it's about that consistency of change and being sure about that. So I think one thing I always say in terms of, you know, when I see a paper, have we really answered that question? So what does this process change mean for residents? Does it actually improve the experience for residents? Because I think behind all the figures we get in our performance figures, there are residents behind there, and can we see that coming through strongly enough? So I think I think Matt's heard we say that, like, about, what is the so what here? Can we see that? Can we see that coming through strongly in our papers? And I know Matt is going out across the organisation doing the very same thing. So I think it's also about involving residents in that change. So as part of our resident engagement, residents themselves have been involved in reviewing the experience of complaints, because part of a complaint is how does that experience feel for residents? Is it difficult? Is there the empathy there that is needed? So residents have been involved in reviewing complaints, and that is a continuous process. So I think our improvement here is going to be continuous and is going to be changing, I think, because I've been a resident for over 25 years, and the resident base has changed, it's grown over that time and become more complex, and I think we have to be alive to that. So I think as part of the paragraph 49 report, it's spoken a lot about vulnerability, and I think that whole concept of vulnerability, that is changing and developing, and I think our services have to reflect that. So I think it's so in having that depth of review, I think it helps us really gear up for that. So I think it's also been strongly about communication. So in publishing the report, there's been communication around that, and there's been continuous online communication and across all of our channels to residents. We were at our residents conference just recently, and I think L&Q, I think we benefit in terms of our engaged residents, because I think they're very supportive of the plans that we have in place, but they're also challenging too. Let's see the change, I think. So I think and I think it's important not to take that for granted at all. So I think what I would say to anyone here listening is really it is keep asking that question. How do you know what you know? Are your processes really embedded, and do you have that feedback loop to keep asking residents? Because at the end of the day, the services we're providing have residents at the centre. So I think I would just end there, and I'm going to just hand back to Matt for some closing thoughts. Oh, you're on mute, Matt.
Thank you, Fayann. I think from my point of view, just to kind of summarise that, I think it feels like it's been a journey for us, which started back in 2021 when we really did change what is the focus of the organisation. We've got more to do. We are constantly testing embeddedness, and over the past 6 weeks, every member of the exec team and the directors in the organisation has spent a day shadowing a complaint handler. And we're collecting that insight now about, okay, so what's working, what's great, what are the blockages, what do we do? And just that's an example of some of that embeddedness and testing, and really testing it, and not just the reports, the performance, etc., but listening and learning and collecting that to see what we're doing well or not. I think coming out of it, our relationship with the Ombudsman team now, I think is strong. We still have regular contact with them formally. Our teams operationally have daily contact with them, and they are very helpful and flexible in that. We don't always agree. Sometimes we challenge some determinations, but I think that's part of that healthy relationship. I think it's done in the right way, and I think as part of that, we both learn from that. We've worked with the Ombudsman team to get them to help to do a briefing session for our team on the learning we need to understand from the Ombudsman's perspective. And the feedback from the team is that was great. That was really helpful for things that we might not have understood previously. So it's been a real catalyst for change for us. Where we are now, we are much better than we were. We're not perfect. We still get things wrong, but we understand now where the issues are. the catalyst for the changes that we put in place. Customers are starting to see and feel a difference, as our colleagues across the business, where they're starting to see things get better and improve. Our performance on complaint handling and learning from complaints is much better. The governance and oversight is very strong on that, and it's an area that P49 might be finished as a monitoring process, but it's never finished. It's what do we now do that's embedded about what we do for changes going forward. So I would describe it as, during the P49 process, very resource intensive, can be painful at times. It can be a painful read, and it can be difficult to listen to some of that feedback. And a lot of that feedback we agreed with, some of it we didn't always agree with, but we had a good, robust discussion to help inform our learning from that. The key bit was we did let those customers down. We let them down badly. We had to accept that, listen to that, put that right for future services that we deliver. And out of the whole process, that's the biggest takeaway, I think, as an organisation we've taken out of it. And it has been a real catalyst for some of the changes we brought in quicker and differently to how we might have done otherwise. So it has been painful at times, but really helpful when you reflect back on it.
Brilliant. And thank you very much, Matt, Raj and Fayann. That was really interesting to hear all of your insights. And thank you as well for being so open and honest about your experiences of the special investigation process. It was really great to hear all of the different perspectives too. We do have some time for some Q&A. If anyone does have any questions for Matt, Raj or Fayann, please feel free to pop your hands up or put any questions into the chat that we can pick up. I will just check the chat now. But I do have a question just to get us started, and perhaps you might get thinking of some other questions, those of you listening in. But my question for you is, if another landlord were to be kind of going through the special investigation process, what would your advice for them be? What would your sort of key bit of advice be?
Yep. Do you want me to go first for that and see if Fayann and Raj want to add anything to it? I think
Sounds good.
The key bit for me is keep the focus on the customers. What does this really mean for customers? What are the key messages coming out of it? And there will be lots of elements to think about in terms of areas where you agree, areas where you might not agree, lots of stakeholders to think about, and communications, and making sure the board are informed. But key thing for me is, don't lose focus on the customers. If you've let customers down, own it, apologise, take the learning from that and fix it. Because at the end of the day, fundamentally, that's the most valuable insight you can get from that P49 process. There are lots of things that could distract you and sidetrack you from that, but you've got to keep coming back to, we've got to get the service right for customers. And the advice would be, if you think something isn't right now, don't wait for the Ombudsman Service to tell you. If you think the service isn't right, go and fix it. And I think that's the real focus on us owning it as a sector. Fayann and Raj, is there anything you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say, in terms of our journey to improving service delivery, the paragraph 49, but we know there'll be other cases out there, because for whatever reason we aren't communicating with that resident, or that resident hasn't come through, or we just missed it. And it keeps me up at night now. There will be cases out there. It tells you that we just need to get better all the time. This investment on the ground is part of, in our stock, is part of the solution. But we just got to get better at communication all the time. And there is pressure. The staff feel the pressure on the ground, and how we recruit in training and retaining our staff always makes me think about the solutions to dealing with complaints.
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, I would say the response is about the whole organisation. So I think, repairs don't exist in isolation, housing management doesn't exist in isolation, our contacts, all of that fits together. So I think at L&Q we've been really, it's been a constant theme that, this matters to everyone. Complaints is about everyone. Fiona, our CEO, and our exec cast it's that involvement from the top, and it's also that alignment with residents as well. So I think it is about that shared endeavour. That's what I'd say.
Fantastic, thank you all very much. Lillian, I can see you've got your hand up there. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Anthea. It's a really informative session. I did start about 10 minutes late because security-wise, trying to log on, it's becoming a problem, but I understand the reason why the security is there. I may have missed this. My question is to Matt, really. How did you start engaging with the team once you knew the Ombudsman was coming to investigate? How did that go? What did you learn from it? What can others learn from that should they find themselves in that position?
Thanks for that, Lillian. I think we had to pause and really think about that communication. So we didn't wait until the report had ended. All the way through from understanding that there was going to be a paragraph 49 investigation, we would have constant communication with the teams, and it had to be through a range of different methods, whether it was the regular executive team cast that we do live to the whole team, whether it was the briefing notes, the managers meetings. So a range of ways to keep people informed about what it was, how it was progressing, and sharing some early insight. There was a real challenge around the balance of that message when the report was published. There was an acknowledgement that we'd got it wrong, that as an organisation we had to be more focused on customers than we had been before, and that we had to learn from that. And where members of the team might not be wanting to engage with that, we will hold people to account much more firmly than we had done previously. So that was part of the message. But the other part of the message was managing their morale as well. Our team do day to day, as I'm sure lots of you will have, thousands of interactions with customers. They're really dedicated, really focused, want to make a difference and work hard. And we had to also remind them that we get lots of things right. And they, a lot of the time, do a fabulous job with our customers. But we've got to accept when we do things wrong, learn from them and get them even better. So that message had to be balanced, and we had to really think about that message at the point the report was published. We didn't just want to go in heavy-handed and say everything was wrong and everybody was at fault. That blame game doesn't get you anywhere. So we really focused and thought carefully about the messaging to cover those two key areas.
Thank you. That's really clear. And for Raj, being the member responsible for complaints, obviously you get reports that's shared with you previously prior to the investigation coming in. What was your take on that? Did you feel you got it right?
I think what I look for in the information is the trends, and I still look at the trends. You know, you want to get below that. You know, we have highs and lows, and this winter is going to be a real test for us in terms of complaints and performance. What tends to happen is we get deep into making progress with complaints, and we have a bad winter, and then you see a rise in complaints, and we're always firefighting and catching up. And finally, after the last 12 months, the trend line is really positive on how quickly we're resolving complaints. Satisfaction is low on complaints. That's a big marker for me on complaints, you know, on complaints handling. And I don't think anyone out there has really good performance on complaints handling. So we all know we've still got lots of room to improve on that. It was all building up. We knew what the issues were. Paragraph 49 brought it home to us. You know, we could see the failings. There were cases we'd had previously, so the patterns were emerging. But as a member responsible for complaints, I think really you just have to get more reality checks and talk to people. I've looked at all the stats and stuff, but really to find out what's happening, are the teams working well together? Our finance processing, payments to the contract, you know, all that relates back to our kind of service delivery, and that's what member responsible complaints has made me do. A bit more operational than I want it to be, but I think it's a reality of an organisation of L&Q size.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you, Lillian. Some really good questions there. Are there any further questions before we close? If not, then I just want to say a huge thanks to Matt, to Raj and to Fayann for coming along and for such an interesting session. Really appreciate all of your time. And thank you to everybody for coming along today as well. I'm just going to pop and see, you've got a round of applause there as well, guys. So well done. I've just popped in a link to the evaluation form that I mentioned. If you could fill it out for us, it should only take a few minutes, and would really appreciate your feedback so we can shape future sessions and make sure we put on more stuff that's going to be useful for you. So thanks again, everybody, for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the session, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.